I mean, what's the point in owning a base if you don't use it?
Am I right, guys? Like, if you've got a wall full of weapons that Rian Johnson steals for his movie 20 years later.
I didn't realize that it was a direct ripoff. I had no clue that it was so
similar.
It's all I could think of while I watched The Wall, because it's the first time I saw it. That's all only thing I could think of.
Yeah.
I mean, did he is there like a payment to the estate here?
Right.
What's going on? I don't get it.
We'll have to dive into that for sure.
Welcome to Film Trace. This is a podcast where we trace the life of a film from conception to production all the way to release and reception. We have two special guests today. We have the Mikes from Forgotten Cinema. Mikes, introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, I'm Mike Field.
I'm Mike Butler.
There you go.
Tell us about your podcast, what it's all about.
Butler, that's you.
I know. We're Forgotten Cinema, a podcast about forgotten films that seem to be forgotten by audiences, whether it be because a more popular movie was released at the same time or the film simply didn't catch on with an audience in its initial run. We'll discuss what we love about the movie, maybe don't love about it, but we always recommend people revisit it. You never know, you might find your own forgotten gem. And that is our podcast.
That's the byline.
I love it. That's a good one. That's really good. We're doing a series or a cycle, I guess we're calling it, on existential thrillers. But this one seems perfect for you guys because we're doing William Friedkin's Sorcerer, 1977, as our main film. Seems pretty darn forgotten, right?
We did this season 1, so it's
right in our wheelhouse.
Exactly.
And it just recently, it's been out of print for how long, right? It's been out of print for forever, and just recently came back on a DVD, whatever 4K Blu-ray thing. I don't know, like a few years ago or something.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot of love lately. I think people
it's had a really strong second life, and I was noticing its Letterboxd score is higher than The Exorcist or French Connection.
That doesn't surprise me.
It's pretty high. So I didn't choose this. Chris, did you choose this one?
Yeah. I grabbed
Tell us about
one.
it. Tell us about your choice.
Well, I was pretty obsessed with The Exorcist growing up, as a normal child would be. And so obviously that brought me to French Connection. And this is like, the late 90s. I'm a preteen exploring the depths of the library's VHS and just starting to burgeon DVD collection. And William Friedkin was immediately like, okay, he's made two incredible films. And I think we have a slight dissent of opinion when it comes to French Connection between you and I, Dan. Is that correct?
What's your opinion on French Connection? Have we brought this up before? I feel like I'm getting cornered here. This is like a surprise.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's what I do here. But I think it's a pretty perfect, tight action crime film.
No.
Okay, no. That's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
But I had, obviously learned about Friedkin's filmography, but Sorcerer, at least back then, was just kind of a footnote, both in terms of Friedkin's filmography and just like 70s cinema in general. But then there was some kind of reevaluation of that entire decade of cinema, especially auteur cinema of the 70s. And it's been on my radar for a few years. I think it was 2014, 2015. Friedkin put out his autobiography and was also in the midst at that time of trying to revive Sorcerer's reputation. And there were tons of film critics that were, behind him on it 100%. And so I don't know. I think it was just one of those things where it's like, I didn't even realize what it was actually about. I didn't even know that it was a remake of Wages of Fear, probably until I actually remembered the film when we came up with this concept of the existential thriller for this season. And I dug into it, and then I just got more and more amped, and I bit the bullet, as I have done a couple times now for this show. And it's just like, I've read so much about this movie. I feel like it can't not live up to expectations. So I bought that new restored Blu-ray, and it's ridiculously amazing.
Agreed.
It's beautiful, huh?
So where did was this part of, when was the first season of Forgotten Cinema, Mike's?
Probably this started May 2019, so it was probably around there, like May, June, when it came out. Yeah, Sorcerer's funny because you watch it and you don't realize that you're an hour in and you're like totally engrossed in the film. It creeps up on you and you're just like, all right, let me give it a shot. And it starts off slow and you get all the vignettes, but it just locks into you. And you're like when they're on that bridge, you're like at the edge of your seat trying to open that they get across. And I always say that Sorcerer's biggest crime was coming out a month after Star Wars. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's when Star Wars came out, everything changed, and the expectation of film in that time was different. And a movie like Sorcerer didn't have a chance.
Yeah, it's just bad timing. Is that it? I mean, it's also seemed like,
oh, whoa, no, there's
what's one of it?
Yeah, I mean the title. It was funny because I saw this on the list. I had no idea what this was. And I was like, oh, like, I don't know what the Sorcerers have to do with existential, like, noir thriller things, but I guess I'm in for it. But, like, yeah, I mean, the title is, obviously, and that's been stated as, like, an issue. Do we think a title can really screw it up this much? I mean, there's so much hype for this movie.
I will say the first time I heard of this movie was I saw that Roy Scheider was in a movie called Sorcerer, and I was like, no way, this guy does a medieval times, like, fantasy epic.
Yeah.
And I had to look it up, and I went, wait, he's in a truck with his dynamite? Is there like an ancient like guy who thinks he knows stuff? No.
Yeah.
It's just a truck.
Just a truck. Just a name on a truck. That's all it is.
Amazing. So let's do the thing where we read the IMDb log line and pick it apart and talk about the origins. Back when Friedkin was hot off of both French Connection and Exorcist and came up with this idea of reimagining the French classic Wages of Fear, which at that point wasn't even 20 years old yet. What is the log line for Sorcerer? It's not anything to do with Merlin or robes or anything like that. What is it, Dan?
A gangster, a crooked banker, and a hitman. Oh wait, and an Arab terrorist. Sorry, are stranded on the run in a small village in South America. Their only chance of escape is to drive 2 trucks filled with unstable dynamite up a long and rocky mountain road in order to plug an escalating oil refinery blaze. It is what it is, right? I mean, that's the entire movie in 2 sentences. But wow, I mean, how does somebody, like, thinking about it back then, I guess it was a super different period of making films, and he had 2 massive hits before this. But how would you have that log on and be like, yeah, here you go, buddy. Here's a lot of money. Like, fly down to Dominican Republic, I think where they filmed it. Just go for it. Spend $2 million to build that bridge scene. Like, build it once, then build it again somewhere else. How does that happen, you guys think? Is that just because of the time period where he was so hot and, he was the solo director genius who knew everything? So they just sort of wrote him a check and said, yeah, that works. Or do you guys think because it was a remake that there's an established sort of, strong narrative going on here? How did this thing get made, do y'all think?
His past work, he's obviously a hot director, and the 70s are a different time. It's really difficult to understand cinema before the blockbuster came about, and because these are the type of films you would get, or Friedkin style films, or movies like 3 Days of the Condor. Like, these are the type of movies you got in the 70s, and though that's before the blockbuster, before Jaws, before Star Wars, before the blockbuster became the thing. So I think more onus was given to directors like Friedkin back then. Now, not so much. You look back at it now, and Friedkin can't get work if he wants to do this. So I think that has a lot to just the perception of a director and auteur back then was just greater than it is now.
Yeah, I think there was the short answer of it. I think the other question to it, though, that was really like boggling my mind upon first watch and also upon reflection is like, compare 3 Days of the Condor or any other like weirdo 70s paranoia thriller. It's all very like American centric or like government centric, but here it's like not only anti-heroes or, just straight up bad guys. But only one of them is American. And like Roy Scheider is like the only recognizable Hollywood name, and he doesn't even show up for like until he's the last vignette, right?
Yeah, man, last prologue.
So what is like that's insane to me. Like I remember sitting the first half hour of the film and just like wondering like, how was this like a wide, like, no wonder it was DOA in the American box office.
Well, the thing, it wasn't DOA technically. Like, it had like there was huge hype around it because, it's Friedkin. Like, it's his new movie. Sure. Like, there is, I think it's just the film itself did not, for whatever reason, it didn't click with people. And obviously the Star Wars has a huge part of that. But I mean, like, you're watching the movie now and we're viewing it through, we're all film nerd bros. Like, we see this thing, we're like, yeah, we're in for the weirdness and the ride of it. But can you imagine being just a typical, the thing about an MCU lover now just goes to those movies and like goes to see this? Like, are they going to walk out? Like, what's going to happen?
I like to think about like a young MCU person, like, with Sam Raimi coming back to Marvel characters and then like digging into Raimi's like earlier films.
That's what made that movie amazing.
It's got to be a mindfuck, but yeah. What's the journey then? There's a quote from Friedkin when it like comes to like his own personal passion project of taking Wages of Fear and this was kind of the big departure from that original French film, is that he wanted to give those four guys, the four truck drivers, this I don't know about elaborate, but like a very solid backstory, that entire like origin story of how did they get to the South American town. And I haven't seen Wages of Fear in years, but to my recollection, and that's kind of what set me up for maybe not the best expectations going in, is I had thought that Sorcerer would be like, at least 70-75%, truck ride thrills. And especially with Friedkin, who's known for like keeping the pace, even though he's also really good about creating backstory. But that's another kind of thought that a lot of people had, including critics that adore the film, is like, who's going to want to stick with this film? You had mentioned earlier, Mike, about how it's like you're not quite sure, and I agree. I wasn't quite sure either why I was interested in following the trajectory of these men's lives as they kind of are forced to, like, this is the bottom of their barrel, is to wind up in this South American town. But that's another reason I'd imagine it didn't connect with audiences, right? Is like, why would we care about it? They're all goons given a spotlight.
Yeah. Why should you? I mean, now the anti-hero is so popular. Like, it's so good to like the bad guy because, but now back then, maybe you're right. Maybe they couldn't connect. Something that came up, I was curious what you guys thought. Something that came up we did the episode 2010, the year we made contact. That also has Roy Scheider. Do you think Roy Scheider, that type of actor, would be a leading man in today's cinema?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
But he's awesome. But you know what I mean? Yeah.
I think he's perfect for this film, even though Friedkin said it was like, what do you say? It was like the worst casting decision of his life.
He didn't like him, yeah.
Yeah, because he wanted, Steve McQueen.
Yeah, which would have been cool, but still, yeah.
But Steve McQueen would have worked. I don't think who would have worked in this. I think
he's not a goon. He's a lead.
No, he's too. Yeah. You believe that he can be a good guy on some level, whereas Roy, I believe Roy can be a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like he's got it in him to be. But I don't know. I think it really works in this film to have him as one of the lead. I mean, he's technically the lead, but he's it's an ensemble to some degree. But no, I think he works really well here. What do you guys think?
I think that one of the things that works in this film that today that maybe didn't work back then is the fact that everybody wants to watch a car wreck.
Yeah.
But you don't want to watch somebody nice get wrecked. You want to watch somebody who kind of deserves it. So you're like excited to watch, like, who's going to blow up next? Oh, is it going to blow up? You don't want to be like, oh man, I don't want this guy who's like a father of three and he's a nice guy and he was just set up by his best friend. You don't want like a Richard Kimball from The Fugitive vibe. You want this guy who shot up a church and flipped a car like 80 times, who should have been dead in that car wreck. And you're like, well, this time the car is going to get you, sucker. Like, you kind of want him to survive, but you also don't mind if maybe there's a huge explosion at the end.
And that's what
that
raises
works
the
now.
stakes too, right? Is like,
right, exactly.
You know, it's very possible that he could, like, it wouldn't ruin the plot of the film. It would make sense on a narrative level.
Before they even go over the bridge, that first scene where there's just like the muddy cliff and it's just the shot of the tires, just that close up of the tires, the cinematography. I'm just like, oh yeah, blow up. No, don't blow up. Wait, maybe blow up? I don't know. It's just like keeps you on the edge of your seat watching just these close ups of these tires. And it should be like boring, but it's not because you know the stakes. But at the same time, you're not really like sad about maybe who goes. You're just like, oh yeah, ooh.
The one thing that, going back to the prologue thing, I felt the prologue to me, which is a big change from Wages of Fear, right? It's pretty different. I don't know. To me, it somehow took me out of the flow of the movie, and I couldn't figure out who I was supposed to be attached to. And me and Chris talk about this. I'm like obsessed with like genre conventions and stuff like this. Like I need my hand held throughout a movie. Did you guys feel like that was like, did that hurt the story and the narrative of it, or did it somehow enhance it? The prologues.
Well, I mean, they're different criminals. They're different types of criminals. You know, one's the French guy was a fraud. He was embezzling funds. You know, so that's, you know, white collar crime. Then you have obviously the Palestinian who blows up the church. Did he blow? Is that what he blew up?
Bank, I think.
Something like that. Yeah, killed all those people. I mean, and then, you know, obviously you have the one who's the assassin who like clearly is just like, you know, I'm evil, that's it, you know, I don't care. There's different levels, I guess. So I guess kind of who you're rooting for, and the fact that, you know, Mike alludes to the dude that the French guy who you knew he was going to die as soon as he showed the watch. Yeah. But you know, if the fact that he goes, you know, he's, you know, nobody's safe, because you would think that if any of them was, you could try to, I guess, connect with any of them. Maybe you could connect with the white collar crime because it's not as violent as the others. Right. But, you know, the fact that he goes, I guess all bets are off, even though it does come later on in the movie. So yeah. But I don't mind the vignettes. I kind of like I said, this movie just kind of creeps up on you, and I was all in, even when they're like just in squalor in South America,
living their best lives,
right? And I'm just kind of like, what is happening here?
Yeah, there's definitely like an othering to it that made it super fascinating, because like you once again, they're essentially side characters put in front and center of the camera, and so I very much felt like that lingering anxiety to it all, just like constant wondering. And so then that almost, for me anyways, made it even more impactful when the actual like stakes started getting raised. Like the whole idea of, you know, you don't really, because they didn't have anything left to lose, right? It's like the whole idea of the bottom of the barrel. And so like, of course, these are the guys that are going to, and along with several other, you know, it's almost like the training montage of their auditions for who's going to become the truck drivers. And you know it's going to be your four guys from the vignettes, but they also still play with that whole idea, like with playing with your expectations. So it's like, it's just like a balance. And once again, it goes to that like that film bro kind of mentality where it's like, it's okay if it's a little boring, if it's going to make that thrill scene that much more intense later on. Right?
So do you think this film is probably more for film aficionados than the casual film buff?
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, like it definitely, it has like an acquired taste or something.
Yeah,
you have to be willing to like go with it, because it's just the pacing's abnormal. The story's not very straightforward in terms of like what your typical thriller plot's going to be. There really isn't a protagonist per se. I mean, obviously it's Roy to some degree, but yeah, there's some difficult parts about it that I think because of those difficult parts, that's why it's become beloved by film aficionados, because it's like it tests you in ways, and then it does deliver, I think. It gives you something for that test. But I think, I wouldn't recommend this, to a random person like, oh, there's this great movie that you've never heard of before, and go check it out. They're going to be like, what the hell was that? It's going to be a lot of confusion,
So we're saying we're film snobs. That's what we're saying here.
100%. Yeah, I would never deny that.
We're podcasting on a Tuesday night. Come on.
I'm fine. Don't like Sorcerer. We love it.
I would say though that because I'm always thinking about how I teach high school students film, and I'm always thinking about the clips that I can show to kind of set up. And I think that anybody could look just at that truck scene, even without the context that comes before it, and just look at, how it's shot and how it's staged and even how it's acted. I mean, the close-ups on these actors, they end up really being an effective, just basic example of how to do suspense. And it's something that is actually really difficult to do, I think, without having some kind of shock and awe effect. And yeah, you've got the shock and awe effect of the explosion, but especially with the bridge scene, there's there doesn't end up being an explosion. So it's that the whole playing with anticlimax too, that is really impressive, and I think could be stacked alongside any given scene from Jaws or Hitchcock film.
Okay, the editing in that scene is awesome, in the bridge scene. That's fantastic.
Especially knowing what went into it and what they had to change and do and how they had to shoot it.
Right. There's this quote from Friedkin when he was doing a press circuit around the release of the Blu-ray, and he went into a lot more detail than he ever had before about shooting that scene. He said, in order to disguise the fact that it was not this enormous rushing river I had hoped for, we decided to bring in rain machines and only film when it was overcast. There's a sense you can't tell how high the river is because we concealed it. Used 3 or 4 cameras from various positions. The fact that I could change the angle really took the audience's mind off the fact that this was not the rushing river. It's all just this perfect exercise in constraints and limitations and framing and composition, in addition to, like you said, the editing and the perfectly timed cuts and everything from the snap and the audio design too, the trees, the tree branches snapping along with the rushing river, and never knowing where it's coming from on any given end. And that's part of the Blu-ray restoration too, is the surround that probably was lost a lot in the translation of VHS releases, and why it probably didn't have a shelf life like Exorcist or French Connection did.
The tow cable, when they used it, especially when they gave so much attention to them putting the tow cable on the truck when they did that. You talk about that montage when they're putting the trucks together. That tow cable, and then the Y-shaped tree branch that was kept moving forward, or it was just you're right. It's almost. I'm not gonna say. I mean, I'll never say a movie's perfect, but that scene's near perfect. That scene is near perfect.
Yeah. And the thing about it too is it seems real. They seem like they're in real trouble,
right?
And it's it also goes to the vision and just iron will of Friedkin to get what he wanted. This thing, it cost $2 million, that single scene, in 3 months to do. That's nuts. What's the average film shoot now? It's 25 to 30 days,
right?
So he took 3 times that amount just for a single scene. Now we can revel in it and be like, oh, it's amazing. And I think that it obviously is, but it was of its time so much, because you could never. Is there anything like the equivalent? Maybe the Northman, parts of the Northman are kind of similar, where it's this guy's nuts. He's just going to go for it. I mean, could you envision anybody doing that today?
In a padded green screen room, maybe.
But right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because it's so. I mean, it's had to be incredibly unsafe. They say that it was safe. I don't believe it. You watch that. There's no way that was safe.
No, they're covering their ass.
That's the best kind of filmmaking.
Risk your lives for my entertainment. One of the funny kind of details that I came across in researching this, I don't know if you guys knew about it, Forgotten Cinema, was that because they were shooting in the Dominican Republic in the 70s, when it was largely like shadow controlled by billionaire industrialist Charlie Bloodhorn, okay, you know where I'm going with this, right? Where he had a picture, he needed a picture for a background shot of quote unquote rapacious oil moguls, and so that there was like some kind of, you know, tenuous connection to the nameless, faceless villains of the unnamed, or is it named South American island, or at least the neighborhood is named.
They call it something.
Yeah.
It's blanking on me, but they call it something.
But they had a Gulf and Western board report sheet just there because it's the Dominican Republic, and that's the Bloodhorn's conglomerate. And then when then they had to screen the footage because Gulf and Western owned Paramount. And Bloodhorn saw it. He was in that initial production screening, and the quote that Zan Brooks from The Guardian had is that he had what was called, quote, a shit hemorrhage in response to seeing like his face and his company right there. Like they also funded the movie and, you know, the exploitation of and probably deaths of so many laborers in that part of the world.
Well, he was fighting with them for a while. He was fighting up during the movie. Yeah.
Well, he wanted to, after the test screening, I think they're like, hey, this is not doing well, the test screening. And then like Friedkin's like, I need some more money to go shoot stuff. And they're like, no, absolutely not. And that's actually one of the reasons why it did fail. I forgot about this, is that they pulled marketing from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They pulled marketing and are like, hey, this isn't going to go anywhere. So we're just going to dump it. And it's too bad. I mean, the whole shoot sounds like, it reminds me a lot of the stories you hear from like Heaven's Gate or like Apocalypse Now. Mm-hmm. Like it was
Geraldo.
It was exactly. It was completely nuts. Like people getting gangrene and like malaria. I don't know. Like do you feel like that? Does that come through that dedication? I feel like it does. Like on what he got on screen. Like that just absolute maniacal sort of doggedness to get what he wanted.
Oh, I mean, to the point where it's almost hard to reconcile, right? Like, luckily, there's no documented, you know,
that we know of,
right?
Yeah.
Or that's, you know, I mean, after, you know, a couple hours of Googling, can't find anyways. Unlike movies like Fitzcarraldo and other film sets that were like notoriously dangerous and deadly for so many. But I mean, if he really did manage to like, you know, keep everybody alive, on the one hand, it's like,
no gain.
That's a low bar. But I don't know. It's just, it's really hard to reconcile for me as, you know, a guy watching it, you know, several decades removed. And also, you know, with the privilege of being an American that had no like connection to, you know, exploited workers. But it's, I mean, who knows? That's the other thing. You talk about like who could get away with something like this nowadays. It's just like straight up. You would think that there would be protections in place, but then when we see what happened on the set of the Alec Baldwin movie. So
yeah, I mean, there's protection. And then Friedkin was also, I forget what movie it was, probably French Connection. They were shooting live guns on set.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So it's like he's pretty fast and loose with a lot of these rules.
Right.
But it almost reminds me, we had a conversation about like Last House on the Left on our last cycle on self-aware horror. And it kind of reminds me of that. Like that was so gonzo and probably unsafe. And put like actors in really terrible situations, especially the women actors in that movie. And it's like, oh man, I love what he captured on film, but you can just feel the grittiness of it.
Yeah.
Like every sort of, you know, it's like the sweat is just there on their faces, and every scene, the thriller part of it does feel authentic. It does feel like everybody is really unsafe and just on the edge. I mean, the last half of it, did anybody here like lose interest, or you guys are like locked in, right?
Oh no, I was all in.
All the way in.
Yeah. I was all in. And the name of the town is Porvenir.
There you go.
I figured
Thank you.
I found
Thank
it.
you.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was bothering me.
Which is completely made up, correct?
Yeah, it's supposed to be in Colombia. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like this guy got an arsonist from Queens to help blow up his tree because he couldn't do it right. Like he just got a ton of explosives and just like, yeah, go ahead, do what you want. He's like candy to an explosives expert.
It kind of runs into like Tropic Thunder a little bit, just like really off the rails.
Absolutely.
I have a question I got to ask you guys, because I was watching the first part of this movie, and I'm like, there's a basic plot point here that I just can't wrap my head around. So the dynamite has like been sitting out for a long time and super unstable, and if you move it a little bit, it'll blow up. Why would you put it in a truck that's going to like go over mountains? And like, does that not track to you guys? Why don't you just put it in a helicopter and fly it there?
I think they talk about that, don't they?
They mentioned it, yeah.
It's too shaky, and plus he doesn't want to risk the lives of men that are valuable to him.
Right.
So that's what he knows that these people in town are just they're
just like
there
whatever.
for a reason. Yeah, they're expendable.
Yeah. Casualties of capitalism.
I love when they're checking the dynamite and how cool and calm the guy is with the nitroglycerin. He just walks out and he's like, all right, so it's just all exploding. It's just
There's a few different points like that, and kind of sidebar, but since you brought up that scene where it's like we cut to seemingly random characters that have yet to be introduced, and it's like this in medias res thing that Friedkin does at like a few different points throughout this movie, and especially because you're set up with those 4 different vignettes at the beginning. I mean, especially if you didn't know they were coming, it's pretty jarring. But then like it's also really exciting, because then as soon as the nitroglycerin, like you start like putting the equation together in your head, and you're like, oh, okay, so they're going to get those guys and it adds, I think, yes, it's narratively maybe not as straightforward, but that's kind of part of the fun of being able to play with the structure of a thriller. I mean, you're not going to really capture or really get those authentic thrills if you're not also like going against the grain and being subversive, not only with your subject matter, but also with how you tell the story.
Yeah, Friedkin's asking you to trust him when he's doing that, and it's whether you decide to like, if you're a big Friedkin fan and you like his movies, you're rather, he's saying like, we'll get there, trust me, but this is the way to get there. So there is a level of trust there between the filmmaker and the viewer.
What do we think about his sort of traditional, very flat, almost documentary style here? I feel like it works a lot, although he does abandon it in like the last 20 minutes, especially as it's just Roy left essentially with his wounded companion.
I found that a little jarring, the last 20 minutes compared to what he had filmed before.
I was like the exact opposite. Like the last 20 minutes was like, this is what I asked for. This is what I wanted.
You son of a bitch.
It's definitely still interesting. You're still watching it, but you're like, this is a different film all of a sudden. This is very different. Well, but I think the documentary aspect really helps in terms of like the truck driving and getting those reactions and making it more visceral for the audience, putting them in the seats of what's going on.
And I think the reason that popped into my head a little bit is just because, this cycle is existential thrillers. And, from the thriller perspective, Sorcerer is like obviously top notch, especially the last hour. It's like textbook how you make a thriller. The existential part, that's a one element of this where I kind of struggled a bit. And the reason I think was because of Friedkin's sort of the flatness and the documentary style. We get a little bit of backstory, but our backstory is always external plot of the character doing something. We don't get a lot of their internal feelings or what they're up to or what they're feeling. What do you guys think? Like, I think I probably missed a through line there when I was watching it. Like, is there more there about what the characters are feeling about themselves, what they want? What's the sort of self-reflection that's going on in this movie?
There's one scene in the vignette about the French banker that stood out to me right away. because obviously I'm looking, since I know we're talking about, this existential type of thriller where it's not just about the suspense, but also about like protagonists that are dealing with some kind of crisis of identity. And it's the banker talking to his wife about this book that she's editing in the hotel room. And she basically is very much affected by this book. It's a nonfiction account of a soldier like committing murder on the battlefield. And the French banker's reaction to that is, very, once again, it's that classic, very, indicative of the rest of the movie, flat delivery and reaction to, well, that's a soldier's job. That's what a soldier does. Like, they're going to extinguish lives, and they know their life may very well be extinguished. And then he himself winds up in that position, not necessarily as the soldier of a country, but like essentially barely hanging on, trying to survive, because he knows that he would be dead or in prison if he didn't, escape to this squalor. And essentially that's, what brings all those four guys together is that same kind of crisis of maybe not asking, who am I, but asking, like, do I deserve to have a life? Because they basically have succumbed to this idea that they don't, until they have this chance to, hit it big and get a decent paycheck. Maybe not to, get out of Porvenir, but at least to, be able to pay off their debts, or maybe move to the next town over and get a manual labor job that's a little more on the level, right? Like, that seemed very apparent just in like the mechanics of the plot, if not in any kind of like internal monologue or narration or, deep dialogue connections with other characters.
Yeah, I think this is the last place that they can go. This is there's no, they'd be lying to themselves that they can leave Porvenir, but as you know, at the end of the movie, no one can. No one, you're just not going to leave this place. Mm-hmm. Whether, I think that maybe this is, you could get, if you can get really deep and say that this is a glimmer of hope for them to take this chance. But, like I said, as it ends, that hope is a fallacy, because they're never going to leave this place. Nobody leaves Porvenir.
Didn't I say in our episode, Mike, that it's like this is hell?
Yeah, I think you could definitely.
Like, it's just a cyclical thing. Like, it's just they're doing the same thing, going to do the same thing over and over, trying to escape. Yeah, it's essentially their hell.
If not hell, one step closer. Yeah,
right, yeah. Or a purgatory of some kind. Which I think is there's a great video essay by Scout Tafoya for RogerEbert.com on his series called The Unloved, and there's like so many very easily missed pieces of imagery that very much recall this kind of, like, if you look at it specifically. And I think the huge thing we haven't mentioned yet is the Tangerine Dream score that adds to that kind of ethereal quality, where you could easily look at it as a much more poetic film than it kind of looks maybe upon first watch, where you get kind of really aggressively shown this documentary style. But I think Roy Scheider's eyes also say a lot. I think that's another reason he works so well, is because he can say so much with so little.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think it is interesting to me, because that 20-minute scene where he's hallucinating, to me, like, that's where it becomes very. Yes. That's where it becomes existential. Like, he's losing his sense of self, literally. And we're seeing it on screen. It's not some distant thing. We're subjective. We're in his viewpoint. We're feeling it with him. Then it does become. That's where it becomes, very cerebral. And you're like, this is the end. It's odd, because it felt like this is the end for him. He makes it, and there's that sense of relief. But then there's obviously the final gunshot. We're like, oh, he never gets out, right? But it's like, is there some sort of triumph in that? And like completing this hopeless, impossible mission, even though he ends up dying? Is there some sense of like optimism or success in doing that?
Do you think he knew that he would never, even though at the end in that bar when he asked her to dance, do you think he was just waiting for the other shoe to drop? Like, he knew he wasn't going to leave?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he
was way
always
too
knew
deep in
that like
the-
this is
He's from the underbelly.
doomed. The moment that the priest was shot in the assault, the robbery, he knew it was over.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of cool part to this whole movie, because it's kind of like, and that goes to like, not to get philosophical here, but like true existentialism. That's sort of the common usage of like, yeah, we're all doomed, right?
Yeah.
Like no matter what we do, we're going to die. And it's like, what are you going to do with the time that you have, or in the situation that you're in, to sort of do something great or do something bold to feel that sense of like being alive? Do you feel like he's feeling alive at the end, or is he just in complete misery?
I think he's just waiting for, like I said, the shoe to drop. I think he's just like, it's coming. Whether even if he was going to get off the island or get out of the town, he was gonna meet up with his inevitability, and maybe that's what him, at the end hallucinating and just almost coming to a realization that this is all for nothing.
Yeah,
this is just delaying the inevitable, or maybe he doesn't want to. He doesn't want absolution. He doesn't want to be forgiven.
That's the other interesting point, is the whole reason those guys are there is because they can't stay in society. And yet they're so, after spending so much time here, they're like, I got to go back.
Yeah.
They're all going to die if they go back. That's the whole point. So they're all fighting for something. They're all fighting for their own death, essentially.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Why can't they just chill out there and just have a good life?
Yeah.
I mean, that money's going to go a long way.
Somebody should recut it where all four of them survive and then create like a little friend group at that bar.
Well, if this was a MCU film, I'm sure their deaths would be off screen, and there would be a new show, Disney Plus show for all four of them.
Yeah, exactly. Or I need the origin story. I need the previous 40 years of their life and 13 series on Disney.
Serrano, the early years.
Yeah.
Should we talk about our chaser film, Deathtrap? I didn't know anything about this one, Chris.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about it. Why? Tell me why.
Why did you
do this to me?
I've always had a soft spot for films that are essentially plays, whether like literally based on them or could essentially be shot like plays. I also thought this was an interesting connective tissue to Sorcerer, since Friedkin, at least attempted to have a comeback in the 2000s with Bug, which is another thriller very much based on and is filmed like a play. There's something I had seen bits and pieces of this movie on probably TNT or TBS growing up, edited version. And so like I knew the basic plot of it, but there were so many pieces of it that I didn't know. And when I like read about, I got reminded that it was mentioned in The Celluloid Closet, which is one of the best documentaries ever about the history of film, and specifically like gay subtext in film over the course of the evolution of the industry. And also just like Christopher Reeve, when he's not Superman. So like I was pretty sold that I wanted to actually watch this unedited for the first time all the way through. And it's not... My initial reaction is it's not great, but I had a lot of fun with the first two acts.
Mike, so have you guys seen this before?
No, I wanted to for a while, and we had done an episode last year, right, Butler? We did Sleuth.
We did Sleuth, yeah.
Okay.
And this came up because it's very similar. And obviously Michael Caine's in both.
Crazy Sleuth vibes.
Yes. But so when you sent me the list of movies to choose, that's part of the reason why I chose it. That list was because I wanted to see Deathtrap, and I wanted an excuse to see it. So yeah. Awesome. So this is the first time I knew some stuff. I had seen clips, but I did not know I didn't know too much about it going in.
I knew nothing going in.
Nice.
Par for the course.
Would you? This is kind of a forgotten film, I think, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I honestly forgot. Like, what happened to this thing? Like, why did it not?
It made enough money, like compared to its budget.
It was a hit.
Yeah, probably because Christopher Reeve is only known as Superman for some people. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's too similar to Sleuth and other films of that ilk. Maybe it's The Kiss. It's funny because I'm watching this, we're all watching this through 2022 eyes, and I start reading the notes, and I'm like, geez, people, calm down. Everyone had a big problem with everything. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Like
Christopher Reeve
and stuff.
had to get like blackout drunk in order to do it.
Yeah, they both had a
that,
Oh,
You paid a ton of money. It's a small smooch. Come on, guys.
Bizarre. I mean, that probably had something to do with it, I guess. I mean, the play was absolutely massive. It's like one of the best running plays on Broadway. So you would think that this would just have more, I don't know, cachet or something. It just doesn't, though. It's kind of just been lost to time. And I do wonder, and we were talking about like Knives Out and how we're watching this and it's like, what the hell? It's just so, it's like it's more than an homage, isn't it? Right, parts of it, it feels like a very like, has Rian Johnson ever talked about this?
So I did some quick searching, and he's very on his surface, a self-admitted, like, no shame whatsoever postmodern guy, right? And he did a Twitter thread back when Knives Out came out of a collection of movie posters in his home, and it was just like movie poster after movie poster of like classic 60s, 70s, 80s murder mysteries. And right in the middle of this thread, I'm realizing now, is Deathtrap. Along with, obviously, Clue, Death on the Nile, Evil Under the Sun, and some more well-known titles. So, I mean, it makes sense. It's very on the nose, but at the same time, like, I feel like it... I mean, the Twitter thread enough, like, it's got, tons of comments and retweets. You think that would I thought a lot of people would start like rediscovering this kind of niche subgenre of like quirky, very, comedic, but also very twist and turny, thriller, murder mystery style of movie. But I mean, instead, Netflix just gave them hundreds of millions to make sequels. So
$400 million to make 2 movies. Ridiculous. What's interesting too with Deathtrap, it's never, I don't think it's ever come up in my readings like postmodern film. And it's super meta.
Right.
To the point where it's almost like cutesy meta. Like maybe that's why it's not like, doesn't have a lot of clout in the academic world for postmodern film. But like, yeah, I mean, you can't get more meta than what this is doing. A movie about a play that's about a play, and the people involved, are trying to write it. It's like, it's so many different levels. I mean, did you guys think this aged pretty well?
I think it's a little too much like Sleuth, and I think it's a little too much like Noise is Off.
Yeah.
And I think that the fact that it's a little too much like both of those, and I think Christopher Reeve being in it, as much as I love him and as much as he was a hero of mine growing up, I think it hurts having Superman in your movie. Not being Superman.
That's not fair to Christopher Reeve.
It's not. I'm not saying it is. Life sucks sometimes, and that's a fact of life. And I think that this is one of the reasons he was trying to do this film, was to get away from Superman. Yeah. But it's so sleuthy and it's so Noises Offy. And if you're going to watch a Michael Caine movie that's like Sleuth, you're going to watch Sleuth. Yeah. And Christopher Reeve is ironically, and Michael Caine are both in Noises Off. And those are both, and I like this film, but I think those are both better films. Because the third act the third act is not strong.
It's not, and not only that, but I was not a fan of whatever Diane Cannon was doing.
What was that about?
Oh my gosh. There's a great quote from her in a profile she did while this movie was being filmed with New York Times. And she says with like deadpan sarcasm, when asked to describe her character in this new movie she's making, she says, "A bit of hysteric. She absolutely serves this man she is married to. Everything in life centers around him. I don't get a lot of parts like that." So like on the one hand, I agree with you. It's like there's something just really over the top that is hard to swallow, even in a movie that is very over the top. And yet, I don't know. I coming out of it, like I love Michael Caine, I love Reeve, but I think she was the more memorable. Like I wanted her to like have the part of whatever the stupid psychic has at the end of the play.
I did think she was coming back at the end.
Yeah.
I thought so too.
It felt like she was in her and the psychic felt like they were in different films, and maybe I wish I have seen the play to know, but maybe the play is more comedic maybe the way Kane and Reeve are playing it, that comedy's lost. Maybe you know what I mean? Because they just contrived to kill his wife, and I know they're cracking jokes, but they just don't come off the style of jokes like Diane Cannon screaming uncontrollably.
She got it. She got the vibe, and Reeve and Kane. I couldn't deal with Kane for some reason in this movie.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Like, I get that it's hammy. It's supposed to be hammy. But he's too much. He's too unmoored, and I'm just like, I can't. It's hard to even
right from the get-go.
Yeah,
so you can't root for him at all. You should try to at least give him a couple lines where you kind of root for him.
Well, he's not charismatic.
He's not at the end. Right. Yeah, that might be the issue.
He's depressed. He's woe is me, or he's just violently yelling at her openly in front of like a quote unquote guest that she doesn't know is not really a guest. He's there for a reason. He's just like, and she's like, oh, it's okay. And he's like, just sit down. And it's like,
What if I recasted Leslie Nielsen? Because I was envisioning that, especially the scene where he was like, out of nowhere, Christopher Reeve shows up and talking about the play, and he just starts like yelling at the fireplace. Do you guys remember this?
Yes.
I'm just like, oh man, where's Leslie when you need him? Like, he would have been perfect for this, because that amps up the comedy way high.
Right.
And it's just kind of folds back into itself. You're like, oh, this is fun. This is enjoyable. But yeah, I think there's a weird middle ground here that it doesn't really, for me, it didn't really like find solid ground. And to me, the third act is just like the other two acts. I don't know. What are you guys talking about? It's all the same.
I mean, I think I was more willing to like strap in for the ride of the first two twists. And it's like, there is this threshold, and I mean, it seems like you guys are making the argument, and I think it's a fair argument that like that threshold is surpassed like within the opening minutes of the film. But I don't know, there was something that was keeping it grounded for me, where it was kind of ping-ponging between more Clue vibes and more Sleuth vibes. But I think that ultimately the part that really kept me centered was they just kind of ruined it in the third act, I think, was this like secret relationship between Kane and Reeves' characters. And I think it's unfortunate. I mean, it's a product of its time, right? Early 80s. But like, as they mention in the Celluloid Closet, that, the kiss was booed by preview audiences. Producer said to Time magazine that they estimated that the kiss cost them $10 million in ticket sales or something like that, even when it was still a hit. Like, that's insane. Like, we had a movie with a gay kiss on screen in 1982 that was a hit. So like, yeah, it's a footnote, and maybe deservedly so, because it's not a great film, but like, there is something that Reeve is doing here that's actually not unlike, I mean, you brought up the Superman kind of curse, but I also think that's something maybe Rian Johnson was doing. I mean, Superman in a white sweater in a murder mystery, and then Captain America in a white sweater in a murder mystery. Like
a sociopath, true, yeah.
Right. That's one of the... Oh, it's a great sweater.
That's a wonderful. Yeah. That's all. What's 100% wool is what that is.
Yeah. Spared no expense. And so I think that it's one of those movies where it's a curio, but there's like, it checks just enough entertainment boxes for me and cultural touchstone boxes where it's like, I like it, but it is, as Time Out said, and it did a whole like anniversary kind of recap of the film for its 30th. Ultimately, it is a movie that is just too clever for its own good. And Rian Johnson managed to, I do think Knives Out is a fantastic film, and he managed to kind of just edge on the and err on the side of, a solid and tightly wound third act, but Deathtrap, just, it's one too many goofs for its own good at the end.
Yeah,
well, Knives Out has the luxury of a great character in Daniel Craig's character.
True,
that can carry that movie because he's controlling the scene. He's doing the classic, whodunit at the end, explaining everything.
Yes, you don't have that here.
He gets that Perot character, yeah.
Right, you don't have that here. And plus,
Anna de Armas' character too.
Yes, yeah, and in Deathtrap, I think what since this is my first time watching it, what pulls me along is just the mystery. Like, okay, what's happening? I don't know if that'll hold up a second viewing or a third viewing, because like when you mentioned Clue, you go back and watch Clue again, you're just all the lines, the funny moments. It's just right. I mean, I don't know if Deathtrap upon second or third watch would hold up to a first watch, for me at least. So in that regard, I can understand why too clever for its own good, or maybe just the errors or the cracks start showing through when you go revisit it again.
Would you guys recommend Sorcerer to people? Who would you recommend Sorcerer to?
People who love film.
Yeah, people who love film and or Camus. Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually some Camus in there. Absolutely.
People to determine if I'm going to be their friend.
Yeah.
It's okay. Taste test.
Exactly.
Purity test.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. Do you have fun having a bad time?
Yeah. Do you enjoy misery? How much do you enjoy your own existential confusion and misery? Because if you love it, check out Sorcerer 1977. Mike's, what do you guys got coming up on your podcast here soon? On season 13, right?
Yes, right? Yeah.
We're 5 or 6 episodes into season 13.
So I think tomorrow our new episode comes out. We got The Drop, the 2014 film with Gandolfini. And,
I sort of remember
Tom
that.
Hardy, yeah. And then we got Phone Booth and No Escape, which we did No Escape before Leo passed.
Nice.
So yeah,
Right before he did, yeah.
Yeah. So and then I think we're rounding out with Eastern Promises.
Nice.
And we're going to. Mike's never seen this. We're going to watch the 2005 Reefer Madness.
Very cool. Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Has there been a recent film you guys done that you're like, this is the forgotten cinema classic that everybody's got to see?
Ooh, go ahead, Mike. What do we have? What would count?
A classic, I would say Strange Days, because that just hit all the right boxes for me.
Yeah, cool.
That was my kind of near post-apocalyptic, this is what the late 90s is totally going to look like, futuristic kind of like thing that I had never heard of. I watched, I loved it. You can't get it anywhere. Field had to get it through means that we won't talk about. But God, Strange Days.
What you got to do?
That was probably the big one for me.
Nice.
Awesome. Guys, thanks for being on. We appreciate it. It's been a good conversation.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for we love talking movies. So, it's always a good time.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Everybody out there, thanks for listening. This has been Film Trace.